Is a bad carrier worse than a bad destroyer battleship player? So, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. So we're gonna do some colored boxes here. We'll have a green box, have a blue box, and then we'll have an orange box. So I'm deliberately not trying to use cap circles. I'm trying to be more encompassing of an area. So if you've got your team, up here, they've got their team down there. In this side, if you've got an excellent battleship player on your side, or you've got an excellent DD, the excellent DD is going to make a situation where they're going to be able to bully this front line, or they're going to be able to brace the front line. So if they're a destroyer that can't really hold very well, they're going to be able to take advantage of the fact that they're a good player. They know that, and they're going to be able to brace this such that the enemy destroyer is not really going to be able to find a way to come in and beat the shit out of the cruisers, the battleships, the people behind him. So this good player is going to brace this line and block any attempts to really circumvent that. And that could just be by the fact that a torpedo destroyer outspots a gunboat, or it just kind of negates the ability to push. So in a way, it ends up putting a lot of the importance of the flank on these rear, midline, backline folks, because if the DD isn't able to make the plays, the team is going to have to. But what the DD can do is give them room to make the plays. A bad destroyer dies, and then the enemy destroyer starts to force all this stuff out of position. They start having to run, they start having to bail, they start getting murdered. So having a DD loses a flank, potentially loses a flank outright, because the destroyer just dies and the enemy simply overtakes. Similarly, if it's a bad battleship player, if the enemy battleship player is outscoring, then you may start to lose ships faster than they lose ships. And eventually, as the enemy has marked off enough of these midline stuff, the DD has to run. The battleship has to run, in which case the side overtakes. So in both cases, a bad battleship or a bad destroyer will lose you a flank in kind of a non-optional way. Like, if you're putting good players against not so good players, I mean, there's going to be an element of chaos. There's going to be an element of random bullshittery. But in general, you are automatically not set up for success in a way that you could expect to lose, because you expect to be outplayed. So what a CV does is a CV does not play the role of a destroyer. A CV does not play the role of a battleship. It does not play a role of a cruiser. So if you have a bad battleship or a destroyer or cruiser, the CV can't make up for that role. But what they can do is they can provide a little bit of assistance. That looks terrible. Just want like a little medic heart looking thing. That's all I'm really looking for here. So they can provide a little bit of assistance. Please, I just want to move this, but it's too small, you say. Son of a bitch. We do it now. We move this. Maybe. There we go. Cool. I have an account problem. Sadness. All right, whatever. So he can come over here and he can fly over and he give a little bit of assistance to kind of patch up a problem. So by giving a little bit of spotting, this destroyer, oh fuck, I'm against that guy. Oh, I shouldn't do this. Suddenly that destroyer might play less badly because you were able to give him a little bit of additional information to make the destroyer play better. But if it's a good destroyer versus a bad destroyer, the CV does not overcome that gap. The good destroyer will still outplay and probably kill the bad destroyer. A really good CV might account for the difference, maybe, by bullying the DD or doing a lot of damage or pushing him into a bad situation. So it's possible that you can overtake, but if you assume average, like if you have an average CV player and a bad CV player, the amount of assistance that they're going to render is minimal. If this battleship is good and he's dev striking cruisers or just ripping cruisers in half versus a battleship that's not very good, doing minimal amounts of damage or, you know, occasional good strikes, whatever, a CV is not going to come in here and just suddenly deal so much damage that it accounts for all the misses or all the poor aim of a good battleship. Can it assist? Yes. Can it make up some of the gap? Yes. But is it going to automatically account for what the battleship could have done? No. One, because CVs are damage gated. They only have so much damage that they can provide. And two, because they're resource gated. So there are situations where if we look at if there's a battleship, a DD, and 2 cruisers, this CV can only attack certain things in certain ways and only do it so much because of the grouped nature of this situation. So really, what is the big part that a CV is going to bring? Well, there are multiple places on this map where your team is going to be engaging the enemy. And this is where the possibility of the space, or of what the carrier can do, really starts to come into its own. Because if this DD and this DD are relatively evenly matched, well, if he comes over here and he renders a little bit of assistance, then that might end up tilting it and this DD dies. Cool. That's handled. And then if the CV comes over here and these are relatively evenly matched and he renders a little bit of assistance, then maybe this ends up going the way or whatever and the enemy DD dies. So if you have a good CV, they might be able to tilt the scales in your team's favor. But if the team that's on the ground sucks, it's unlikely that, unless the CV literally just kills everything, which is unlikely to happen because CVs are kind of gated in what they can do, then they're either not going to hold, and they're going to have to end up bailing, or they're not going to move forward. They're not going to be able to overtake and win the flank. They're just going to kind of sit stagnant. So in my mind, in terms of the immediate flank, in terms of the immediate area of operation, the surface ship is much more effective than if you have a good or a bad CV. Now, you might be pressured by the enemy CV coming over and rendering assistance and put you under a lot of pressure, because if you're evenly skilled and this guy's coming over and exerting a lot of influence, then yeah, your side might buckle and break because of that assistance that he's rendering to his enemy team. But again, if the enemy team over here sucked in the first place, there's only so much the CV can do. So it's a tough question. The big thing is this guy's going to be able to help this flank and then also help this flank after, and then maybe come back and help this flank again. And because of the back and forth nature of it, a good CV player can manage multiple different situations on the map and try to put out fires before they like turn into a raging inferno or the flank just completely buckles and breaks. Whereas a bad CV player is probably just going to focus on one or maybe focus on a specific thing and shit happens. Whereas again, a skilled surface ship player could straight up just win the effing flank and then start to move and exert influence across the rest of the map and start winning that as well. So I don't know. Tough question, long answer. Hopefully that was useful. But yeah.